Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to rank all of Christopher Nolan's movies and I'm going to do it while being drunk, and yes, I'm still drinking. I wanted to do this particular video series called CinemaDRanked for a very long time, where I rank stuff based on maybe directors or movies or even TV characters, anime characters, animes, basically anything where I basically rank stuff that's related to cinema. And by cinema, I mean actually all media. Like I said, anime, TV series, movies, anything. And preferably I wanted to go live for this, but because my subscriber count right now is pretty less, it's in I think more than 200. Probably when I get to around 1000 or 2000 subscribers, I'll be able to do this live and maybe have a conversation regarding it, because I think as much as I do want to voice my opinion on this channel, I do want to involve other people, and maybe when I talk about one particular movie here, I want to hear thoughts from other people as well. But right now I'm pretty happy with the channel growth and I'm pretty happy with everything. So let's just start by ranking all of Christopher Nolan's movies. I picked Christopher Nolan because he's my favorite director working today. I'm actually only 23 right now, so I practically grew up with his movies. Like, I think that maybe if I was born in the 1970s, then maybe I would be a Spielberg fan. And depending on where when you were born and the movies you were exposed to, I think you all might have your favorite directors. But because I'm of this particular generation, I think Christopher Nolan is really that particular guy that not just for me, but for many people, at least it's one of their favorite directors, if not their favorite director. So I picked Christopher Nolan. I think he has more than 10 movies or something like that in his filmography. So I'm going to just take a look at each of these movies and trying to put them in categories from never seen till masterpiece. So let me just explain to you what these categories mean, at least in my metrics. So for many of you, there might be no movies that ever released that were masterpieces. But for me, a masterpiece is a movie that was probably the best movie of the year or the best movie in the past 2 years. But it's not a rare thing. It occurs every year or every 2 years. So if a movie is in that particular masterpiece level, it means that it probably deserves to win best picture of that particular year. That's how I see a particular masterpiece. It's near perfect movies. It's, you could say, even perfect movies. So those kinds of movies fall into the masterpiece category. If you go to the S category, it movie means that the movie was probably in the top 5 of the year. Probably not the best, but definitely in the top 5. And it could be in the best if the year was a bit weaker. So maybe some of these S movies that I categorize these Christopher Nolan movies into, probably they were actually the best of their particular year. But yeah, it's less than a masterpiece. It's not a perfect movie, but it's near perfect. And it was probably the top 5 of the year, which is saying a lot, because getting into the top 5 means that it probably deserved to get nominated in Best Picture. And that movie is basically a top level movie. Like, if you ask me to point out flaws in the movie, probably one or two, but not more than that. That's an S level movie. When we talk about A level movies, I would say it's a top 10 of the year. Like, when I talked about S, I told top 5. When I talk about A, I mean top 10, which is still good, very, very solid, excellent movies. And probably a couple of Christopher Nolan's would fall in this category, probably not. I haven't thought through about it. I've seen almost all of his movies more than twice or thrice even. So we'll see where his movies fall into when it comes to masterpieces or S or A or B. But yeah, I just wanted to explain what each of these mean so that when I start the ranking, you guys are not confused about, okay, A means bad, A doesn't mean bad. A means that it was probably the top 10 of the year or something like that. So A is that highly up. Then we are talking about B, C, and D. So B means that the movie is very good, but probably not top 10 of the year. It means that the movie had flaws, flaws that were not just small nitpicks. It was more than just nitpicks. So these movies are not in the top 10 of the year kind of movies, meaning that they were probably still good movies. I'm not saying that the B section is bad. It still means that it's a good movie, but probably not to the level that you expect from the best movies of the year. Then we talk about the C level, which really means that now we are talking about the average movies. So not even good. Like, it's an average movie. It's probably worth seeing once. but not more than that. And when we talk about D, obviously it means that the movie is bad. I don't like the movie, it's below average or something like that. And never seen means that I just have not seen that particular movie for some reason. It doesn't mean that I have any opinion on that movie because I have not seen that particular movie. So I'm going to put that in the never seen category. Let me have just a sip of the drink before we begin. So the first movie here that we are going to talk about is Batman Begins. So let me just say this about Batman Begins before placing it into one of these categories. Before, because I'm still debating it whether it should be among the two of these categories. So Batman was dead. Okay, when you check after Batman and Robin, there were no Batman movies far as I remember, and people basically grew tired of that character because we got a lot of Batman movies before, and Batman was dead, and it needed to get revived. It needed to have its reputation back as a franchise. And when Batman Begin released, it did well at the box office. I think it grossed around 500 or 600 million dollars, but it, or even lesser, I don't exactly remember, but it, I know that it wasn't very profitable considering its budget. But what it did very well was revive the Batman franchise, and I think it's an excellent movie. Like, I think people don't talk about Batman Begins when they talk about the Dark Knight trilogy, but I think Batman Begins was that movie that basically established the Batman character again and gave us a different kind of a Batman. I think many people now see Ben Affleck's Batman as this dark character, but Christopher Nolan was the one who started bringing that darkness into superhero movies. Like, you could argue that X-Men movies were pretty dark, but not at the level of Batman Begins. And even though I think that Ben Affleck's Batman is much darker, obviously much older, I do think that the Batman we got from Chris Nolan is probably my favorite Batman. So because it revived the Batman franchise and because I think it's a near perfect movie in terms of complaints, I would say that probably the ending is pretty predictable and the ending is not memorable. If you ask me, all the what happened in the climax action sequences, it was not something that was very memorable. It was still great, but not memorable. In terms of the final ending, you would call the post-credit scene, obviously we get the tease of the Joker, which was very exciting, but in terms of the ending and the climax, it was just an action scene, and probably it could have been maybe a bit more in terms of scope. But again, that is, I would say, a nitpick. It's not something major. Batman Begins is still an excellent movie, especially the first half. It almost works like a ninja movie. So I'm going to put Batman Begins in the S category. I don't think it's a masterpiece, but I do think it's right up there. If I had seen all of those movies that was released along with Batman Begins in that year, I would say it's top 5 of the year. Which means that personally I would nominate it for the Oscars in the Best Picture category. But again, it's not like the Oscars are not my personal list. I would have many of these in the Best Picture category that did not get nominated. But Batman Begins is that movie that's, although not a masterpiece, it's very close to being one, which is huge praise. Trust me. Like if you tell me to rank or Batman Begins among the greatest comic book movies, I think it would be in the top 10. And that's high praise considering that I'm actually a superhero movie fan. I do love some of the superhero movies like Civil War and even the Avenger movies, at least a couple of them. So saying that Batman Begins in the top 10 of all the superhero movies is saying a lot, and the S category fits it very well, which means that Batman Begins is, although not a masterpiece, is still a very good movie. In terms of the things that I remember most from the movie, I think the major thing is how Christian Bale became Batman, how he undergo that training with Liam Neeson as Ra's al Ghul, who was excellent. So one of my favorite parts of the movie was when Ra's al Ghul was training Bruce Wayne, and that particular eye sequence, and how he's talking about vengeance and about why did Bruce never take vengeance, but Bruce Wayne reveals that he did try to take vengeance, but it was not something that healed him completely. So it deals with a lot of ideas like vengeance, forgiveness, rage, those kinds of stuff that was explored later in the Batman and also in Ben Affleck's Batman. But I think it started here, and people don't give the credit Batman Begins deserves, because it really started the Dark Knight trilogy, which I think is one of the best trilogies of all time, and it started the phenomena of creating superhero movies in a darker genre. So I think we have talked enough about Batman Begins. Let's talk about the next movie, which is The Prestige. So The Prestige is mostly about, you could say, a couple of best friends, you could say a couple of magicians, you could say a couple of rivals, and it becomes really intense. Once they do start competing with each other, upping each other with each magic trick. And of course, when we talk about The Prestige, we have to talk about the twist and the tale of the brothers. But I think the movie is more about finding each other. So basically, here Christian Bale's character finds things about Hugh Jackman's character through his diary, and vice versa. Hugh Jackman's character finds details about Christian Bale's character, and the and how they go through each other's minds and reading what each other thought, and that's how we got that particular movie where we see both of their perspectives, which is very rare in movies. When you talk about movies, you talk about a protagonist and an antagonist. In terms of The Prestige, I don't know which is the antagonist and which is the protagonist. I would say that probably Christian Bale is the protagonist because he's the so-called good guy, but you could argue it both ways. But like I said, it's basically about two main characters fighting it out with each other in a bitter rivalry, and they were once friends. And I think that The Prestige, you could argue that is Christopher Nolan's one of the better screenplays. I think it's a better screenplay than probably all of the Batman movies. I rate The Prestige very highly. Like when I watched it for the first time, I loved it. When I watched it for the second and third time, I loved it even more. And I realized that there's not a flaw in the movie. So that's why I'm going to put The Prestige in the masterpiece category. So the next movie that we are going to talk about is Inception. So when I first saw Inception, I knew about the totem that keeps spinning. I'm not going to lie. So I knew about that particular thing. I knew about the ending, but what makes Inception truly special is that even though that you know the ending, there's still a lot of talking points from the movie. Whether it was totally a dream, whether it was just a part of the dream, which of these are dream sequences, which of these are not. Whether it was all reality until the end when it was a dream, whether the totem spinning is even something that we should care about, whether the totem of Cobb was actually his wedding ring. So many questions, so many things to dive into. And even if you are one of those persons who does not like to watch movies twice or thrice, Inception is one of those movies that even if you watch just once, the screenplay is so good, the dialogue is so good, it's very stylish, it's very elegant, and the way he directs action sequences, and especially that rotating hallway sequence, which will go down as one of the greatest scenes of all time, make Inception a true masterpiece. Now, the question becomes, is it better than The Prestige? I'm not going to lie, Inception was for the longest time my favorite movie of all time. I just watched that movie twice or thrice, and I thought that there would be no movie ever made that could top Inception. I was around 15, 16 at the time. Now I'm 23, so I'm much more mature, and I know that there are better movies than Inception, but Inception was that movie that I defended till that I would watch it unlimited amount of times. That's why I think Inception is better than The Prestige. So I'm putting it just above The Prestige. It's definitely a masterpiece. Like Prestige. Even Prestige is a masterpiece, but I think Inception is even better. And it would be interesting to see if any movie tops Inception. Like we'll talk about other movies like Interstellar and Oppenheimer and The Dark Knight and those sorts of movies that are usually considered as best. But for some reason, Inception was my favorite movie for a very long time, of all time actually, not just Chris Nolan movies. So let's see, it will be hard to top. Trust me, it will be hard to top. So next movie we are going to talk about is The Dark Knight Rises. And the complaints are totally legitimate. Like the geography, how Bruce Wayne travels from one point to the another. But seriously, guys, when you are talking about a comic book movie, the complaints you have are regarding the logistics of how one person travels from one point to the other. You're talking about how he's able to light that particular tower. He's able to basically put those particular matches and basically light that tower. How did he get that much time for that instead of appreciating how cool it was when he lit that particular tower with the Batman sign? Are you going to talk about literally how characters are moving from one point to the other when you're talking about a Batman movie? Why are we not talking about how great Bane was and how he was a physical threat to the Batman? Now, The Dark Knight Rises explores the concept of the Batman when he's vulnerable, when he's doubting himself, when he's not at his physical best, when he's not at his mental best. And I don't know, guys, like the Dark Knight Rises is an excellent movie. Like, I know there are faults in it. You can put faults in almost any comic book movie because it's a comic book movie, guys. Like, surreal things are supposed to happen, and not for 1 second when I watched The Dark Knight Rises did I think about how that character went from one place to the other or how implausible some of the things were. I just enjoyed the cinematic experience. I just enjoyed the theater experience. Sometimes you don't have to go and nitpick and pinpoint everything regarding a particular movie. You could just enjoy it as a movie. And trust me, in hindsight, after seeing so many of these movies this year and also in the past few years that were pure trash, I think many of you will find a deeper appreciation for what The Dark Knight Rises was, especially following up from The Dark Knight, which you could argue is probably the greatest comic book movie of all time. How can you top a particular movie being sequel to a particular movie that's considered by many as the greatest comic book movie of all time and probably one of the greatest movies of all time? I think it's in the top five highest rated IMDb movies, The Dark Knight. How do you top that? You don't top that. You make a different kind of a movie. You make a different kind of a movie that's serious. I don't think we see Batman for the first 30 or 45 minutes of the movie. And it's still really good. We get behind what Bruce Wayne is thinking. We get behind what Alfred is thinking, the whole dynamics between Alfred and Bruce Wayne, how Alfred leaves Bruce Wayne because he realizes that Bruce Wayne, probably if he goes down this path, is about to die. And that's what we get also in the ending of the movie, which is ambiguous. Did Bruce Wayne die? Did he not? I think he died. And what Alfred was seeing was just a vision. And that made him happy, knowing that Bruce Wayne went out in his own terms. But yeah, for those reasons, I think The Dark Knight Rises is quite not a masterpiece because I think the flaws are justified, but it's probably better than Batman Begins. So I'll just put it above Batman Begins, almost at the masterpiece level. But because I do know that there are a couple of flaws, and when I did rewatch it, I get what people were saying. But again, just as a cinematic experience, The Dark Knight Rises works at so many levels. I think it has some peaks that are even better than The Dark Knight, like that particular pit scene when Christian Bale is finally going out of that particular pit after so many failed attempts. It's one of the greatest sequences of any movie. And when you experience that particular scene at the cinemas, when he finally makes that final jump and gets out, like it's one of the magic movie moments of all time. So that's why The Dark Knight Rises is better than Batman Begins. It's not a masterpiece, but it just falls under that particular category. Next, let's talk about The Dark Knight. I think everyone has talked about The Dark Knight endlessly. I think for many of the people, it's probably the greatest comic book movie of all time. And The Dark Knight is probably one of the reasons why we now have more than five movies in the Best Picture category, and now it has even expanded to 10 movies in the Best Picture category. And I think it's because of The Dark Knight, because I think everyone felt that The Dark Knight should have been nominated for Best Picture. Everyone is losing their heads about Barbie. Guys, Top Gun Maverick last year, the highest grossing movie last year, was not nominated for Best Director despite receiving the DGA nomination for Joseph Kosinski. But it did not get the best director nomination at the Oscars. Tom Cruise was not nominated as best actor. So why are we expecting that Barbie will get nominated? I still think that Barbie not getting the best director and best actress nomination is a snub. I think that they were getting all the momentum. Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, they were nominated for each and every award till that particular point, but they just stumbled at the final hurdle, which are the Oscars. And in my opinion, the Oscars made the right choice of awarding basically Anatomy of a Fall above Barbie, because I think it's just a better movie. And a similar thing happened with Top Gun Maverick last year, but we didn't see any backlash regarding Top Gun Maverick. Why did we see a backlash regarding Barbie? Was it because it was directed by a female director? If Top Gun had been directed by a female director, would we have seen a similar backlash? Hell yes. But because it was directed by a male director, we did not see any particular backlash. So yeah, that was my mini rant about Barbie and how it compares to The Dark Knight. But The Dark Knight was nominated, not nominated for Best Director. Chris Nolan actually got his first Best Director nomination after a very long time. A movie that we are going to talk about later. But like I said, The Dark Knight is a masterpiece. Many people consider it as the greatest comic book movie of all time. I'll have to think about it. Is The Dark Knight actually the greatest comic book movie of all time? Hmm. I would say it's still Infinity War. I do think Avengers Infinity War is the pinnacle of the MCU. I loved Endgame as well, but I think Infinity War is a near perfect movie, and I would say it's a masterpiece. So I'm not going to say the Dark Knight is better than Avengers Infinity War, but I think for most people it's better than Avengers Infinity War. But yeah, for me, if we are comparing, especially the Dark Knight with Inception or the Prestige, I would say it's probably better than the Prestige, but I would still rank Inception above the Dark Knight, which I think it's already a controversial choice. But I would put Dark Knight right now, at least, as the number two movie, just behind Inception. Still better than the Prestige, still a masterpiece. I can't flaw the Dark Knight. It's the Dark Knight. But Inception offered something much more deeper, much more ambiguous, a kind of movie that I probably like more. But yeah, these are just masterpieces that we are talking about. All these three movies that I have placed in the masterpiece category. So The Dark Knight does make it probably the greatest super movie of all time in my list, top three superhero movies of all time. But for the sake of this particular list of ranking Chris Nolan movies, it misses out at the number one spot. I still have Inception at number one for now. The next movie I'm going to talk about, it's pretty divisive. People have argued that it's not Chris Nolan's best. I think many people think Dunkirk is Chris Nolan's worst movie, which I totally don't get. When I saw this movie, I never thought Christopher Nolan had that in him, to be frank. Because every movie before Dunkirk, you could say that it's a Chris Nolan movie from various states, but Dunkirk was a war movie that was very much a Chris Nolan movie, but it was very different as well. It was emotional, not in the sense that we knew what these characters were thinking or the background of those characters, but the character of that movie is the geography of that movie, the air, the sea, and the land. The intertwining between all of those three things was so expertly done. You could see a similar thing happen later in Oppenheimer as well, but in Dunkirk, it was perfectly mastered. I do think it's a masterpiece. I don't have any flaws with that movie. The most impressive thing about Dunkirk is that even though do not know much about these characters, we still think about them. Like, we want them to survive. And the actors that he picked for Dunkirk were all unknown actors because that's how he wanted us to see that particular movie, as just some soldiers wanting to survive a brutal situation. And Dunkirk captured that beautifully. I think one of the greatest sequences was finally when the soldiers realized that people were coming to help them. Normal people, everyday people like you and me, went on the boats, went through the missiles. Like many of British people say, it's one of the most inspiring moments in their particular lifetime. It's one of the most inspiring moments in history. How normal people, civilians, went out and saved these people. And throughout that particular movie, we are seeing that ticking sound. Okay, that something tense is about to happen, and it happens 60%, 70% through the movie. And then we get that moment where home, which is basically something that they associated England with, practically arrives towards them through boats, and we see the civilians saving these soldiers, taking these soldiers in their boats and saving them. It's an extraordinary story, and it's told in such a Christopher Nolan-y kind of a way, but it impacts so much. He did justice to the story. I think Dunkirk is also a masterpiece. I know many of you might disagree. I think many of you might think that there are moments in the movie that just did not click with you. There are no characters in the movie. Like if you ask me, tell me five things about that particular character, I won't be able to say even one thing about their past, about their future, about basically character development. There's no character development in Dunkirk. It's all about the situation of getting trapped and getting out of that particular situation. These people may be horrible for all we know, but still we want them to get out because it's a horrible situation. The situation is the character of that movie, and how he basically uses time and creates these amazing moments through time. It's just simply breathtaking. Like if you ask me to point out a flaw in Dunkirk, I won't be able to do that, except saying that it probably lacks character development, but that was the whole point of the movie. So I'm going to place Dunkirk in the masterpiece category. Probably not as good as the Prestige or the Dark Knight or Inception, but it's right there up with Nolan's best. And I think that Nolan getting his first Best Director nomination for Dunkirk is very fitting. It's a war movie. It's that kind of a movie that the Oscars love. So I'm going to put Dunkirk in the masterpiece category. And I don't know many of you will disagree, but after a couple of rewatches of Dunkirk, I just thought it was amazing. I think even Tarantino rated it as his number two movie of the decade. Means that if you talk about the 10 years, he thinks that Dunkirk is at number two in one of the podcasts. So uh, he rates Dunkirk highly. I rate Dunkirk highly. I know many of you don't, but Dunkirk is right up there. Next, we are going to talk about the following, which I've never seen. Uh, how can I explain this? So I've never seen the following. I don't know why. I'll probably get around it eventually, but I do know one thing, that it was made at an insanely low budget, and by low I mean really, really low. Even less than $500,000 or even lesser. I don't know the exact number. It's made at a budget that's insanely low. $6,000, guys. The following was made at $6,000. Like $6,000. A movie was made for $6,000 that people really liked. Nowadays, people say that Nolan requires a large budget and those sorts of things, but he started at very low budget. He started with the following, which is made at just $6,000, and then he made Memento, which costed a little bit more, but still very cheap, and he got a best screenplay nomination for Memento. Like this guy really started from the down. He started from the basics. He knew that he won't get a big budget movie right from the start, but he started with those kinds of movies and he impressed with those kinds of movies. So for any person who wants to make movies and wants to get inspired, I think again Christopher Nolan is a perfect example of a person who started from low budget movies but had his own imprint in all of his movies and then went on to obviously be the man he is right now. But again, like I said, I have not seen Following. I'll probably see it eventually, but for some reason, even Memento I did not see for a very long time. I finally watched it and I loved it obviously, but Following I've still not seen. And I'm not going to pretend that I've seen it and place it in one of those categories. I'll probably see it and then put a review on it and then place it among these. But for right now, I'm going to place it in the never seen category. But again, a monumental movie in Chris Nolan's filmography. It was really his first movie, and I think that from what I've heard about the movie, it has his Nolan imprint in it. And but because I've not seen it, I really can't give my opinion on it. So now let's move on to Tenet. For many of you, I think Tenet is Nolan's weakest movie, and I'll have to agree. I think Tenet is his weakest movie. It's not great. It's probably not even the top 5 of the year kind of a movie. Is it in the top 10 of the year kind of a movie? I think we can debate that here. So the things I love about Tenet is its ambition. It's a very James Bond-esque movie, but obviously it has the Nolan complexities regarding it. Like many people think Insomnia is his weakest movie or maybe Dunkirk, but I do think Tenet is his weakest movie. But surprise, surprise, it's still a very good movie. And the more I see it, the more I talk about it, the more I think about it. And the re-release is also happening, guys. Tenet is being re-released by Warner Brothers, and it's going to probably arrive, I think, on February 23rd. But it's getting a re-release because it came out at a time where movies were really struggling, and it still made decent money at the box office. I think it grossed more than 300 or close to $400 million, which was an insane amount when you consider that it came out during the pandemic. But obviously, the movie did not get the reception that it wanted because it's just not an excellent movie. It's not a masterpiece, far from it. Um, I do think that if you watch Tenet for 10 times, then you'll probably get the whole movie. Um, but if any movie demands you to see it that many times for you to get it, and if a movie does not reward you with just your first impressions of the movie or your first experience of the movie, I don't think that movie deserves to be like among the top movies of that particular year. So Tenet was that movie for me. I do think there's an excellent movie there. I know that there are many people who think it's a masterpiece. I personally don't. I think Tenet is easily Nolan's weakest movie, but it's still very good. I'm going to put Tenet in the B category for now. Um, let's see if any other movies make that particular B category, but I do think it's Nolan's weakest movie. But like I've mentioned at the start as well, B still means it's a pretty good movie. It just means that the movie has flaws that I just can't overlook, and I can't put it in the top 10 or the top 5 movie of the year category. I don't think Tenet is at that level. But again, maybe after a couple of rewatches, that gets fixed. But again, like I said, if a movie requires you to watch it many times before you put it in that particular great category, or it requires you to like analyze each and every scene for 1 or 2 hours and like nitpick each and everything, then maybe Tenet becomes a much better movie. But I do think that movies should be judged based on your first viewing of that particular movie, and I don't think Tenet holds up that well. So I still have Tenet at the B category. It does not fall into an average or a not good movie. It's still a very good movie. Probably in the higher tiers of B. Maybe it goes to the A level after a couple of years when I've watched it a couple of times. But for right now, I'm going to have Tenet at the B level. The next movie we are going to talk about is Insomnia, which I think is Chris Nolan's most underrated movie. I think Robin Williams and Al Pacino. You would never associate these guys with a Nolan movie, but Insomnia was that movie, guys. And when I first watched it, I loved it. When I watched it again, I loved it even more. But again, it's not one of those movies that is very memorable. Um, like The Dark Knight, like Inception, like The Prestige, like Dunkirk. These movies operate at a very very high level. I think Insomnia was adapted from an already made movie, from a book or something like that. So it's not a unique Chris Nolan vision, and it shows in the movie as well. It basically has some constraints. It's still a very Nolan movie, but if you ask me from all of his movies, which movie feels like the least Nolan movie, it's Insomnia. But I do think that people don't give Insomnia the credit that it deserves. And I do think Insomnia is a very good movie. And that's why I'm going to put it in the A category. So that's about Insomnia. Still a very good movie. I recommend that you watch it. I think many people have not seen it. There's especially one sequence where Al Pacino is going through the fog. That's just brilliant. It's one of Chris Nolan's best scenes. But again, it's not a masterpiece. It's probably not in the top 5 of the year as well. But I would put it in the A category. I think it's better than Tenet. I think it's a very good movie, but I don't think it's one of his best. So the next movie we are going to talk about is probably his most popular movie. One of those movies that when I first saw, I never thought it would gain the fan following that it eventually did. I'll be totally honest. When I first watched this movie in the theater, I did like it a lot, but I did not love it. I thought that there were ambitious things about the movie that was too much for Nolan to handle. I thought there were ideas in the movie like love transcending space and time that is still not making complete sense to me. But if you ask me to name one movie that I've researched the most about, I think it's Interstellar. It got me into science. It got me into astronomy. It got me into what the fifth dimension is, what the sixth dimension is. What is. I was profusely searching for the movie online, continuously reading about it. And when I watched it, at the second time. Like, I think if you watch Tenet for the third or fourth time as well, it won't make much sense, or and you won't still like it as much as the other Nolan movies. But for me, watching Interstellar for the second time is till date my favorite movie going experience of all time. When I watched Interstellar for the second time, I don't know, just something clicked so beautifully. Even the love aspect of how it transcends space and time, the father daughter story, and everything about it, I find it brilliant. Like, it's literally right there with Inception, if not better. I'm still working through it, and I'm also drunk right now. I don't know if it's better than Inception, if Interstellar is better than Inception, but give me a minute to figure that out. So let me just say this. I've talked to so many people who rate Interstellar not just Christopher Nolan's best movie, but the greatest movie of all time. I think it's ranked on Letterboxd as the number one movie of all time or something like that. So me putting Interstellar just below, I would say, Inception. This one, let me explain this, okay? So, like I've told before as well, Inception for me was the greatest Chris Nolan movie, or the greatest movie of all time, not just a great Christopher Nolan movie. I thought it was unbeatable. I thought it would never be beaten. I thought that I've seen the greatest movie of all time. Like, Inception is just on that particular level where I can't find any flaws in that movie. Interstellar has probably higher peaks than Inception. It has better moments than Inception. And in some days, I feel Interstellar is better than Inception. But in general, I think Inception is a better movie than Interstellar. It's more grounded, I would say. It follows the rules better. Interstellar takes huge risks. Most of them pay off, but I do remember loving Inception a lot more than Interstellar, at least in my first viewing. And I do think that's important. Many people don't like to see movies again. And I think that if you have seen Interstellar only once, and if you've seen Inception only once, maybe Inception is the better movie, or maybe not. But again, personally, I think Inception is just slightly better than Interstellar. But I take more out of Interstellar. It made me more of a person of who I am than who I was before. It made me love movies. It made me research about movies, how they are made, how things were shot. Interstellar was that movie for me, and I think many of us. I think for many of you, it may rank as the number one movie in Christopher Nolan's filmography, but I would have it at number two, at least as of now, till I discuss any further movies. So only two movies remain, guys: Memento and Oppenheimer. So the next movie I'm going to talk about is Memento. So without Memento, there is no Chris Nolan. Like, I'm not going to lie. If Memento had failed, no one would have picked Chris Nolan to direct the Batman Begins movies, and we would not get these high budget movies like Dunkirk, Dark Knight Rises, The Dark Knight, Batman Begins, Interstellar. Those kinds of high budget movies that usually no director gets. Like, these were original movies. Don't forget, guys, Interstellar is an original movie. I challenge you, go and search in Google highest grossing original movies of all time. You will have Inception and Interstellar in them. That's how amazing Chris Nolan is, that he's able to make these original movies that work at the grand scale, at the box office level, at the critics level, at every level. That's the, I think, the brilliance of Chris Nolan, that it's not just my personal favorite. Like, I don't care. I don't love Star Wars as much as most people. I think those are still very iconic movies. I can say that a particular movie is iconic even without loving it, because of the impact that it had. Star Wars was that particular movie. But without Memento, there would be no Christopher Nolan. There would be no Batman Begins. It was through Memento and the fact that he got a best screenplay nomination for Memento, and then he went on to make so many amazing movies that still had that imprint from Memento. Like, I think you can see Chris Nolan all over Memento. The way he manipulates time in that particular movie is arguably still the best way of that he used time in any of his movies. Like, the fact that Memento started from the end and ended at the beginning and climaxed at the middle. Like, If you pitch this to anyone, they will say that you're insane. Even saying this, I'm thinking, how has he made this movie this particular way, so impacting, amazing performances? It's a masterpiece. The question is, where do I place it among his top movies? So in masterpieces, currently we have Inception as the number one, Interstellar as number two, The Dark Knight as number three, Prestige at number four, and Dunkirk at number five. I'm going to place Memento. Let me check. Let me just place it here first, and then I'm going to place it. It's better than Dunkirk. It's better than The Prestige. Is it better than The Prestige? Let me think about that. Hmm. I'll have it lesser than The Prestige. I think Memento is a masterpiece. Like I'm saying, masterpiece is like once in a year kind of a movie. When you see all these movies here, it means that I obviously love Chris Nolan, and like comparing two masterpieces is so difficult. Like it's close to impossible. But again, when I think about The Prestige, I think about a more mainstream movie, having Christian Bale, having Hugh Jackman, having Scarlett Johansson, and I don't know, like The Prestige is unbelievable. The fact that I'm putting Memento under Prestige does should not mean anything really. All of these are masterpieces, hard to compare with each other. It's now just about personal preferences. Like the movies below, you could argue that The Dark Knight Rises has flaws, Batman Begins has flaws, Insomnia has flaws, and Tenet has flaws. But when I talk about these one, two, three, six movies, flawless, absolutely flawless. And when you make a flawless movie, and if you give me a cinematic experience, you get that number one spot. And I'm not one of those people who is creepy about what masterpieces. Like I've defined before as well, masterpiece is not that once in a movie in a particular lifetime. It's basically suggests that it was probably the best movie of that year or the best movie of the past couple of years, and I think all of these movies satisfy that particular category, and Memento is a masterpiece in my opinion. So the last movie I'm going to talk about in this video is Oppenheimer. Damn, like you guys see that this glass is still not empty, but I've had a couple before as well. So I'm really drunk right now. So Oppenheimer, where do I place Oppenheimer? I think it's the best Christopher Nolan movie. No spoilers. I'm just going to start with it. I think Oppenheimer is a masterpiece. I think it's Chris Nolan's best movie. Like any other movie, when I do watch it for 2 or 3 minutes for a particular scene. So, for example, I watch Inception for that rotating hallway sequence, or I watch Interstellar for that docking sequence, or I watch The Dark Knight for the ending and the Joker sequences. For some reason, when I start watching Oppenheimer, I can't resist myself from watching the entire movie. I can't believe how good Oppenheimer is. The screenplay of Oppenheimer is the greatest screenplay of all time. I can argue that with anyone, I can debate that with anyone. The way he has intertwined sequences between the past and the future and how it interlinks with each other, the dialogues are so perfect. Like, one criticism that I can actually get behind of Chris Nolan movies is that his scripts are very cold. Like there are no character development or moments apart from, I think, The Prestige explores a lot of character moments. That's why I think it's very highly rated. But apart from that, other movies, there are moments and there are relationships, but you could argue that Chris Nolan likes to make his movies in a very cold way where everything is methodical. I think Oppenheimer breaks that. Oppenheimer is a character driven movie. There are many characters in the movie that have layers upon layers in them. And that's what makes Oppenheimer his best movie. Like there are other movies, you could say Inception, Interstellar. But if you talk about Inception, Interstellar, you don't talk about a particular character and their complexities. There are great characters in these movies. I'm not telling you that there are not. There are amazing characters in these movies. But Oppenheimer is just that one movie that not just gives justice to Oppenheimer, but even to Strauss, even to other characters in the movie. like Oppenheimer's wife. I'm not remembering her name correctly. Kitty, yeah, Kitty Oppenheimer. Obviously, the biggest compliment I can give Oppenheimer is basically giving justice to each and every character in it, whether it's scientist, whether it's personal. I can feel a person there, and I'm not seeing a movie with characters. I'm seeing the person there, and I think that's very rare for Chris Nolan. Even though I have so many movies in the masterpiece category, I think Oppenheimer achieved something that I did not ever know Chris Nolan had it in him. It's a character piece. It's done amazingly well at the box office, as well as with the critics, as well as with the Oscars. Chris Nolan will win Best Director finally for Oppenheimer, and I could not think of a better movie to basically grant him that this particular win. Oppenheimer is that particular movie. I think I can watch that movie till the end of time. It's very, very rewatchable. And for the most people that I have talked with have loved Oppenheimer. And people say that the holdovers has a chance. I think it does if Oppenheimer loses any steam. But why will Oppenheimer lose any steam? The movie is completely rewatchable. You could watch that movie for the ninth time and still love it and not get bored of it. If you told me that you have just one room to live out your total life and you just have one movie to watch, I would pick Oppenheimer. It's just that immersive. I just get into that movie and I get lost in that movie and I can watch that movie over and over again from the first scene. There's no best scene in Oppenheimer. Every scene is the best scene in Oppenheimer. So that's it, guys. I think I've ranked all of Chris Nolan movies. I have Oppenheimer at number one, Inception at number two, Interstellar at number three, The Dark Knight at number four, The Prestige at number five, Memento at number six, Dunkirk at number seven. Nolan has delivered seven masterpieces, in my opinion, but he has seven masterpieces. Like, it's insane. Like, if you tell me any other director that has this much in their masterpiece section, I don't think there would be any. So for me, Chris Nolan is the greatest director of all time. But again, I'm just a guy who's 23, born in this particular generation when Nolan exists. So maybe for you guys, he's not at that particular level, but for me, he is. Then I have The Dark Knight Rises, and then I have Batman Begins. Still at the S level, means it was at top 5 movie of the year level. Amazing movies, close, very close to masterpieces, which is not a term I just put lightly. Like, I think by masterpiece, like I've said before, it means it was in the top one. It was the best movie of the year, or probably the best movie of the past couple of years, if a particular year was weaker. But I do think it's at that level. Then I have Insomnia, still a very underrated Christopher Nolan movie. Like, many people think of Insomnia as a movie that has an IMDb rating of 7 or something similar to that, and a Rotten Tomatoes rating of around 80 or 70%, which is a bit low when you compare it to other Chris Nolan movies, but I think it deserves to be talked about a lot. I think Insomnia is a brilliant movie, and considering it was one of Nolan's earliest movies, it's really an achievement. And then I think the weakest movie that he has in his filmography is Tenet. No one disputes that, but guess what? When Tenet is going to get re-released, I'm going to book that IMAX screening, and I'm going to book it as soon as possible, because even in 2024 or 2023, we get movies like Tenet, very few and far between. It's a very rare movie. It's a movie going experience. It's a cinematic experience. I think the biggest regret I have in my life, one of the biggest regrets, is not watching Tenet on the big screen. It was released at a time when cinemas were closed, and even if they were open, my parents would never approve me going out. And in India, we think a lot about our parents. We don't want to disappoint them. So I did not watch Tenet at the big screen. So I'm dying to watch it when it comes out in IMAX. But yeah, Tenet is Chris Nolan's weakest movie, but it's still a very good movie, which says a lot about what I think about Christopher Nolan. So if you like this long video, please do like and subscribe this particular channel. Like I've said before, I would want this particular video to go live at some point in the future. Not this particular video, but this particular video series to go live in the future. But I'm pretty content with making at least the first episode offline, because I know that very few people will watch it if I do go live. But yeah, I'm still getting used to this format. I'm still getting used to YouTube. And if you like this video, like I said, please offer your support by just subscribing to this channel. Like I've said, I do these reviews and movies or analysis for free because I love movies. even if I never make an earning out of these things, I'll still continue to do it because I just love movies so much, and I could talk about them even without bothering about the finances and all. I still have my day job, I do work at a company and all that, but movies is something that makes me enjoy life just a little more. And again, thanks for watching this video. Let me know your ranking of all of Christopher Nolan's movies. Would love to check them out individually. And yeah, again, guys, many thanks for watching. I'll just finish up this drink and also the food that I have had that I planned to eat throughout this video, but for some reason I was just so into these movies that I was not able to even eat properly. So hopefully by the end of this video, I'll eat and I'll finish this particular drink. I'm already pretty drunk, my head hurts, but again, thanks for watching, guys. Please do like and subscribe. And yeah, again, many thanks for watching. I have to close this video or I'm going to go insane.